Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to Ryan Rishardi. Ryan, you may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to those of you on the West Coast. My name is Ryan Rishardi, and I'm a data scientist in the American Community Survey Office at the U.S. Census Bureau. And with me today is Jason Fields, a senior researcher within the Social, Economic, and Housing Statistics Division. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted after the webinar. In addition, the PDF versions of the slides are available on the ACS events page at the link shown on the slide. You can submit your questions at any time during the webinar using the Q&A feature, and one of our team members will try to answer you as soon as possible. I want to thank you for attending today's webinar titled Comparing the American Community Survey to the Household Pulse Survey. Hopefully, we can enlighten you and further your understanding of the similarities and differences between the American Community Survey and the Household Pulse Survey. All right, so to begin, let's start with a quick overview about the U.S. Census Bureau as a whole. And yes, there is much more to the Census Bureau than the once every 10-year census. The Census Bureau is the largest of the 13 primary federal government statistical agencies. In addition to the once every 10-year census, we also conduct over 130 censuses and surveys of households and businesses across the nation each year. This includes the American Community Survey, the Household Pulse Survey, and about 30 other household surveys. There are also over 60 economic programs. The biggest and most well-known of these is the Economic Census. And there is information on our nation's public sector provided through the Census of Governments. The Census Bureau's mission is to serve as the nation's leading provider of quality data about its people and economy. Here is an outline of today's presentation. In the first part of the webinar, I will introduce you to the basics of the American Community Survey, including how the data are collected, the topics included, and the geographies covered. I will also explain the types of tables or data products available from the ACS, including how to access them. Then, Jason will take over to explain the Household Pulse Survey, or HPS. He will provide an introduction to this experimental ongoing survey, including the content included in the HPS and where to access the data. Then, I will discuss the main differences between the two surveys. This portion will include information as to when you may want to use ACS or HPS data, depending on what you're looking for. Lastly, we will conclude by providing you with resources for learning more about the two surveys. So with that, let's get started. So the ACS is the nation's most current, reliable, and accessible data source for local statistics on critical planning topics. The survey samples approximately 3.5 million addresses each year. These data are collected continuously throughout the year to produce annual social, economic, housing, and demographic estimates. The data collected through ACS helps inform how trillions of dollars in federal funds are distributed each year. Our estimates cover more than 40 topics and support over 300 known federal uses and countless non-federal uses. The Census Bureau typically releases 3 different sets of data estimates from the ACS each year in the form of 1-year and 5-year period data sets, as well as 1-year supplemental estimates. The ACS was fully implemented in 2005 and began collecting data for all of America's communities each year. There is also the Puerto Rico Community Survey, or PRCS, which is the equivalent of the ACS in Puerto Rico. In 2010 and moving forward, the decennial census is only a short form sent to all households because the ACS now collects information each year that was once collected by the long form each decade. So how does one participate in the ACS? First, addresses are randomly selected to participate. In a typical year, the ACS data collection operation uses 3 modes that take place over a 3-month period. Households that receive the survey can respond via the internet, by mail, or by personal visit with a field representative. Typically, the first phase of data collection includes an invitation for the household to respond via internet, which is mailed to the sample address. If the household does not respond online, a paper questionnaire is sent to the household to complete and return by mail. If the Census Bureau can't reach anyone at the sample address, or if the unit had an unmailable address, the address may be selected for computer-assisted personal interviewing known as CAPI. If the census receives an internet response or a completed paper questionnaire from the sampled address at any time in the data collection process, we will remove the address from the data collection workload. Each address has about a 1 in 480 chance of being selected in a month, and no address should be selected more than once every 5 years. Also, respondents are always able to call the Telephone Questionnaire Assistance or TQA line if they have questions about the survey or if they prefer to complete the survey over the phone. And so each completed survey is important because it's a building block that is used to create statistics about communities across the country. All right. So this slide organizes all the topics covered in the American Community Survey. Content can be grouped into 4 main types of characteristics: social, demographic, economic, and housing. Taking a closer look at the type of information each of these categories contain, on the left here are social characteristics. This includes topics like disability status, educational attainment, and language spoken at home. The ACS also collects basic demographic characteristics such as sex, age, race, and Hispanic origin. Then we have economic characteristics, which includes topics like commuting to work, employment status, and income. Lastly, housing characteristics, here in orange on the right, include topics such as computer and internet use, home value, and vehicles available. Some of the topics included in the ACS, shown here, are also included in the Household Pulse Survey, which Jason will discuss in more detail in just a bit. All of these topics are used to produce more than 1,000 tables for local communities each year. Along with the numerous topics covered, the ACS also provides data for more geographies on an annual basis than any other household survey. There are over 13,000 geographies for 1-year estimates, 15,000 geographies for 1-year supplemental estimates, and 776,000 geographies for the 5-year estimates. The image on this slide shows some of the geographies for which ACS data are produced and the relationship between them. Lower geographic areas fit neatly within the larger areas directly connected with lines. So for example, school, congressional, and state legislative districts will fit neatly within states and will not cross state boundaries. However, they may cross boundaries of counties or metropolitan areas. In this visualization, you can also see that the smallest geographic building block is the block group. And the wide range of available geographies is a big strength of the ACS, as it has the most geographies of any Census Bureau survey. All right, so earlier I mentioned there are 3 different types of ACS data products. There's 1-year, 1-year supplemental, and 5-year estimates. The data collected, these data products are generally released about a year after the data are collected. ACS data are generally released in September, the calendar year after collection, as 1-year estimates, in October, the calendar year after collection, as 1-year supplemental estimates, and the 5-year estimates are generally released in December, the calendar year after collection. So for example, the 1-year ACS data collected from January 1st through December 31st of 2022 were released in September 2023. ACS 1-year estimates combine data collected over 12 months, and they are available for geographies with a population of 65,000 or more. ACS 1-year supplemental estimates are simplified versions of popular ACS tables, and they're available for geographies with populations of 20,000 or more. And ACS 5-year estimates combine data collected over 60 months and are available for all geographic areas of all sizes, down to very small geographies like census tracts and block groups. And so the full detailed data release schedule for each year is available on the link you see on the slide, which you can also navigate to by visiting census.gov/ACS. Okay, so here's a county map that shows you which releases are available for different parts of the country. In this map, the dark blue counties receive 1-year, 1-year supplemental, and 5-year estimates. These are counties with a population of 65,000 or more. The light blue counties receive 1-year supplemental and 5-year estimates. These are counties with a population of 20,000 or more. While the yellow counties only receive 5-year estimates. These are counties with a population below 20,000. This picture reveals geographic variation. For example, many counties in the northeastern United States do meet that 65,000 population threshold, so there are lots of 1-year data available for those counties. Similarly, on the West Coast, most of the counties get 1-year data. But as you can see in parts of the Midwest, especially in the Dakotas stretching down to North Texas, those areas have much greater reliance on the 5-year data because those counties do not meet the 65,000 population threshold. And so on this slide, you can see that the dark counties, which have populations of 65,000 or more, represent 26% of all counties, while light blue counties have populations of 20,000 or more and represent 59% of counties. All right, so what do all these headlines have in common? They all belong to news stories written using ACS data. On the left are stories from news outlets that are based upon ACS data. The stories on the right are America Counts stories, which are stories written by Census Bureau staff and are meant to present census data in an accessible way. The 2021 ACS 1-year estimates were the first sets of data released that encompassed time after the outbreak of COVID-19, and many news outlets reported on the demographic, social, economic, and housing changes that happened during the pandemic. For example, you learn from the ACS that between 2019 and 2021, the number of Americans working from home tripled, that Texas leads the country in the percentage of uninsured people, and that the poverty rate varies significantly by age group. And on the right are stories written by Census Bureau staff in the form of America Counts stories. Here, you can read how interracial couples are more common among same-sex couples than among opposite-sex couples, and how insurance coverage for workers increased in 2022. And you can read an article about social vulnerability to disasters using the new Census Bureau data product called the Community Resilience Estimates, which uses ACS data. So whether you get your news stories from news outlets or from the staff here at the Census Bureau, ACS data can provide you with a quantitative dimension to a wide variety of demographic, social, economic, and housing trends happening across the country in geographies big and small. As we like to say here at the Census Bureau, data tells stories. We have a variety of data access tools. This is a list of a few of those tools. The tool you use will really depend on what exactly you're looking for. I'll briefly talk about just a few of the ones shown here. Data.census.gov is the Census Bureau's main data dissemination platform to access Census Bureau statistics. Quick Facts provides selected statistics for all states and counties and for cities and towns with a population of 5,000 or more using the ACS. My Congressional District gives you quick and easy access to selected statistics collected by the ACS and county business patterns for congressional districts across the country. And My Community Explorer combines weather data with ACS data to give you a deeper understanding of the social dimensions to environmental disasters. All of these data tools are available from census.gov. You can find them by clicking the Explore Data tab from the ribbon at the top of the screen, then click on the Data Tools and Apps tab to view a comprehensive list of all census tools and apps. And with that, I will turn it over to Jason Fields so he can talk about the Household Pulse Survey, or HPS. Jason?
Thank you, Ryan. Hopefully everybody can see and hear me. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the Household Pulse Survey is part of a broader program now in the Census Bureau called the Demographic High Frequency Surveys. Demographic high frequency surveys were really established to try and provide a platform and a program where we can produce and disseminate data in as close to real time as possible to support rapidly changing and emerging policy needs. They provide a platform that is ideally data-driven. It's rapid, it's minimally processed, and it's a supplement to our traditional gold standard surveys like the ACS or the Current Population Survey, and provide information in a very quick turnaround type of framework. The Demographic High Frequency Surveys supports several different programs. The Household Pulse Survey is the original and oldest, and we'll talk about that for the remainder. But there's also some high frequency surveys that we are doing for other federal agencies on a reimbursable basis. For example, for the National Center for Education Statistics, we're conducting the School Pulse Panel. For the Department of Defense, there's a military sample panel. And we're working on an additional household panel. Okay, next slide, please. So again, a couple things to keep in mind. What we really focus on is a streamlined survey lifecycle with a much lighter infrastructure. What that means is that data come out from the Household Pulse with missing data. They are not fully edited. There are only limited dissemination products, and we'll talk about those. But the point is that we are able to change content quickly and release data as in a much more rapid fashion and respond to emerging needs. So some of the types of things where, of course, we started this in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but other events like the 2008 housing market collapse would be a good another good example of where you might want very quick questions, or natural disasters. So our criteria are that the content on the Household Pulse meets specific criteria for urgency, a compelling need, they're not part of another ongoing data collection, and that it meets the needs and uses and standards of for the Census Bureau to be included on the survey. We also expect that the content we include on the Household Pulse is there for a time-limited basis, which means even though it may have been your favorite question, it's probably going to come off at some point and be replaced with a next new question. The content is intended to cycle like that. And if a content is developed and shows a lot of value on the Household Pulse, the hope is that if it needs ongoing collection, that it will find a home in one of the more foundational surveys. Additionally, one of the things we've strived for with the Household Pulse is that we're clear about the limitations. This is an experimental survey. It has limitations, that these are documented and made publicly available. Next slide, please. So the original high frequency survey is the Household Pulse. The Household Pulse was developed to meet the needs of the COVID-19 pandemic and understand how the pandemic was and continues to affect American households. It was unique in a lot of ways. It was developed in collaboration on the fly over the course of a couple weeks with 5 other federal agencies and the Office of Management and Budget. It's a large survey in the sense that we sample and send out invitations to about a million households every cycle. And the data collection originally was completed in first a 1-week cycle and turnaround. Then we switched to 2 weeks, and now we're using essentially a monthly continuous collection design. Data are received from only from internet self-response instruments. We only are reaching out to households with email and SMS text messaging. And this really represented a new approach for producing federal statistics that can be timely and relevant, while, of course, as I said, preserving integrity and the transparency in the process, being able to show people where the weaknesses in the data are, and yet still provide good context and good information. It is, as I said, again, an experimental data collection. It was initiated as a proof of concept, except here we are, 4 years on, and it's still going. So I think we've proved that it has some value and some benefit, and that there is a place for this type of program in the suite of data collections that the Census Bureau has. Next slide, please. So the Household Pulse survey has been running since April 23rd of 2020. The important, the ramp up timeline, we designed this from between March 13th and April 23rd. It was designed, programmed, and implemented, which is stunningly fast for federal statistical agencies and this type of data collection. As I said, we started with 5 partner agencies. We've now expanded to many more. You can see from this list the dimensions in the Household Pulse, and the partners extend across the federal government and include agencies beyond just federal statistical agencies. We're, again, collecting data only by internet. We're using a platform called Qualtrics, and using only electronic invitations. An important characteristic of the Household Pulse is that we're grounding it in the Census Bureau's master address file. This is the same sampling frame that the ACS uses. And this is a rigorously maintained address list that lets us make sure that we can understand the representativeness and the quality of our surveys. And that's especially important for the Household Pulse. To the MAF, the master address file, we add data from the census contact frame, and that's where the email and cell phone numbers come from. They are added to the contact frame from private sources as well as from survey responses. And this is an important way for us to be able to reach households. And in the course of the pandemic, when all of our field data collection was essentially stopped, our phone centers were not able to be staffed. This became the only way we could reach people. So next slide, please. The content on the Pulse has changed, as I noted, but it has stayed in these kind of basic domains. We cover basic demographics, and in fact, in the demographics, the only content that is weighted, that is edited, is there for weighting, and that's age, sex, race, number of people in the household, and educational attainment. We cover questions on employment, food security, health and mental health, housing, and education questions. In addition, there's questions on natural disasters and displacement, questions that are more subjective, where we ask about feelings of pressure to move, thoughts about eviction and foreclosure, stress about spending, etc. Next slide, please. Data are accessible in a number of different ways. one of the first and probably one of the easiest places to get data is from our interactive data tool. This was created and stood up very quickly. But through this tool, you can generate statistics on a number of different estimates, see the margins of error, look at it at the national, state, and for the 15 largest metropolitan statistical areas, and look at it over time. So there you are able to download data as available from all the different cycles of the household pulse. Next slide, please. We also produce data in tabular format in Excel and CSV files. These files are on a number of different domains, the same domains essentially that you saw on the content slide. We try to have tables that include information from each of those. The tables are organized around a couple different things. First, you'll see that there are, across the top is the characteristic that we're talking about. And importantly, for all the characteristics, you'll see a column or a row that indicates whether or not somebody did not report, or the count of people that did not report. That's important to recognize in these data. As I said, they are minimally processed and there is missing data. So as you look at counts and you calculate percentages, it's important to recognize that the people who did not report are important, and they probably would be distributed amongst the other columns if they were there. So my suggestion to people as they calculate percentages from these tables is to remove the did not reports from your denominators for your relevant percentages. Another feature in this table is you can see the geography represented across the tabs on the bottom. There are 66 tabs in each of these files, one for the US, one for all the states, and a tab for each of the metropolitan statistical areas, the 15 of them. Next slide, please. And one other thing, I guess, real quickly on the tables, for every one of those estimates tables, there's a companion table that includes the standard errors. An identical table, you can see the standard error for each one of those estimates. And there's statistical source and accuracy statements that you can use to generate your margins of error. One of the other things that happened with the Household Pulse is we really took advantage of our America Counts story series. A number of stories were written over the course of the pandemic by our subject matter experts, where they were taking a look at a more nuanced look maybe at some of the topics, and providing a quick, short analysis or paper description of given topics of interest. The Household Pulse really has made a good use of this, and these information have been shared very broadly and shown up in a lot of different venues. Next slide, please. And to that end, the media and the public sector has been making a lot of use out of the Household Pulse. So it's not just our analysts that are looking at it, but there's a lot of good information coming from the Household Pulse into the mainstream area. And one of the things that I really like when I see is when media are careful and pay special attention to the qualities of the pulse, as well as the margins of error and the limitations of the data. Next slide, please. Okay, and I am turning it back over to Ryan, and he's going to talk about the summary of the differences. Ryan?
All right, thank you, Jason. Now I'll talk with you about some of the main differences between the American Community Survey and the Household Pulse Survey. Okay, so to begin, the purpose differs for each of these two surveys. The ACS is the premier source for detailed population and housing information about the nation. As I mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, the ACS replaced the census long form. By contrast, the HPS is a rapid response survey designed to produce data on critical social and economic matters affecting American households. The HPS also strives to disseminate data in near real time to inform federal and state action. There are also differences in data availability. ACS data are published every year, while HPS releases data every month. Oops, jumping ahead here. There we go. So next, there are some differences in data collection methods. The ACS collects data through the internet, mail, and in-person visits. The ACS is also a mandatory survey. Response is required under federal law. The HPS, however, only collects data through the internet. Respondents selected for the HPS are contacted only by email and by text message. The way one goes about accessing ACS data differs from those seeking HPS data. The row on this slide titled Tools to Access Data details the many ways to access data for each survey. I would like to point out that HPS data are only available on the census.gov website on the Household Pulse webpage shown on this slide. HPS data are not on data.census.gov, the API, or any other data dissemination platform. The sample size differs between the two surveys as well. The ACS samples approximately 3.5 million addresses each year. The HPS samples approximately 1 million addresses per cycle, and a cycle is about 1 month. When you're retrieving ACS and HPS data, keep in mind that there will be some differences in available geographies for each survey. The ACS has data available for nations, states, and counties, and all the way down to census tracts and block groups. By contrast, the HPS has data available for nation, states, and the 15 largest metropolitan statistical areas, or MSAs. Okay. For the level of estimates, this is one where ACS and HPS are pretty similar. For both surveys, it's possible to get person level and household level data. For reference periods refer to the period for which questions apply. In both surveys, this is going to depend on the question. Respondents are asked to respond to questions as they apply for a specific time period. For example, in the ACS, respondents are asked if a person in the household has given birth to children in the last 12 months or what their income was in the last 12 months. The ACS also asks what the electricity costs were in the last month, and we ask if a person worked for pay in the last week or what a person's means of transportation to work was in the last week. So as you can see, the reference periods are going to differ there based on the question. And the third row in the bottom are content highlights. These are some, I guess you'd say, like interesting data that are not commonly found on some other Census Bureau surveys. So for example, in the ACS, you've got asks questions about computer ownership, vehicles available, health insurance, transportation to work, and so on. And some highlights from the HPS would be that what are the like household spending, food sufficiency, natural disasters. They ask questions on mental health, employment, and others as well. Okay. All right, so now I'd like to conclude this webinar by providing you with some resources for learning more about ACS and HPS. So first, we have the ACS main page, which is a great tool to start with if you have questions about ACS. This page can be found by going to census.gov, selecting surveys/programs, and then selecting ACS, or simply go to census.gov/ACS. The ACS website contains a wealth of information about the survey, data products, tools for data users, and other helpful information. Next, I'd like to provide you with some resources for staying in touch with the ACS. The 3 QR codes on this slide provide you with links to connect with us. The QR code on the left is for the ACS Share Your Story webpage. If you use ACS data in any way, we'd love to hear about it. We know a lot of people use ACS data, and we'd love to hear how or for what projects. So please consider sharing your story if you use ACS data. But if you don't have anything to share, you can browse other people's data stories on this link as well. The middle QR code will take you to the ACS Data Users Group, which is a website and online community with over 5,000 members, where you can share messages, materials, and announcements all related to the survey. Membership is free and it's open to all of interested ACS data users. Finally, using the QR code on the right, you can sign up for and manage email updates from the ACS. This monthly newsletter will alert you with when new materials are available, and you'll stay updated on all our data releases. The links and QR codes on this slide are for some of the main household pulse resources. The first link is for the main page, similar to the ACS main page, but for HPS. And then similarly, there's links that correspond to data tables, the PUF, which is the microdata, there's data tool, and then there's their experimental data page. Okay. And in closing, I want to share information on how to find answers and get support after this webinar. This slide shows you resources for both the ACS and HPS. Our census.gov website pages are both great places to learn more about each survey. If you would like data user support, there is an email address for ACS and HPS to get in touch with Census Bureau employees who will assist you with your data inquiry. There is also the Census Customer Service Center phone number shown here as well. I want to point out Census Academy as well. Here you can learn how to access and use Census Bureau data with recorded webinars, presentations, tutorials, and more. We have a new course called Discovering the American Community Survey that is an accessible yet thorough introduction to the ACS. Follow the Census Bureau on social media with the @US Census Bureau handle shown on the screen. There are also hashtags for both ACS and HPS data. And so with that, we've reached the end of this webinar. I hope you learned something about these 2 exciting Census Bureau surveys. Thank you for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.